afternoon, Slush. I'm Camilla, the head of investor relations at Slush, and I'm super excited to be on stage with the founder and general partner of Creandum, Staffan Helgesson. Hi, Staffan. How are you?
I'm good. I love it. I'm here at Slush.
It's your favorite week of the year, I heard.
Favorite week of the year. You saw that on LinkedIn.
Okay, but yeah, we're going to dive deep into the myths of VC and all the interesting questions. But first, I wanted to talk about Europe. At Slush, we're super bullish about Europe. But Staffan, what makes you excited about Europe?
So I started to do this 26 years ago when I was visiting Silicon Valley. I was there on a company visit. My company sent me there for a couple of weeks. I had no clue about venture capital or startups. And the first evening, we had dinner in the Stanford cafeteria. And I very naively thought, oh, this thing with startups and venture capital, we should do that in Europe. So I then came back, and I have to say that in the early days, Europe wasn't that exciting. This ecosystem had started in the US probably 30 years before us. But fast forward to today, I've never been more bullish. And why, right? So there's 500 million people. Just think about that, 500 million people. The US has 330, 340, right?
Yeah.
They're also cutting down on immigration. Immigration is great. I mean, look at the founders in Silicon Valley. 60, 70% of them are first, second generation immigrants. And Steve Jobs, do you know where his dad came from?
From Europe, maybe?
Syria, exactly. He was a Syrian professor. I don't think he would get a visa today, right? And Europe has lots of immigration. So just thinking about the numbers, we have a sort of 1.5x talent advantage versus the US. There's a lot of things we need to fix, right? But now we have the role models, the investors, all the service providers, we have Slush, etc. Yeah, so I'm super bullish.
Amazing. But why should founders stay here? Why not just go to Silicon Valley, as you said?
So my view on this is neither or. I think you should probably do a bit of both. Now, it's not that easy. I mean, I meet founders all the time, and by the way, I love that ambition. I want to take my company to the US, I want to win global, etc. But if you go over to San Francisco and you stay there for a week or two, you realize it's pretty noisy. It's also close to impossible to hire people. So my view is you should go. Sometimes you should establish your company there. Sometimes you should move all of it. But quite often, you should have a foothold, and then you should use Europe for what Europe is great at, which is talent, development, etc. Plus, COVID was great because suddenly people started to work remote, and a lot of the people in the US that are great at go-to-market, which is where we are not that great, they are now willing to work for the best European companies, and they work remote. And if you look at Lovable, Lovable's management team of 7 people, I think 5 he has hired from the US. 3 of them have moved to Stockholm. I think it's great.
Yeah. Okay, so we are bullish on Europe. Going into kind of the VC scene, what are the biggest changes in VC since you got started? What do you want to tell the founders? What do they need to understand?
Yeah, what have not changed, right?
Yeah.
I think everything has changed.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I think speed has changed. If you go back 20 years, we would sometimes have a month or 2. We could really get to know the founders. We could make a ton of reference calls, etc. At least at Creandum, we have what we call deal flow meetings 2 times a week. We often have 5 to 7 days to make up our mind. We have pitches on Sundays or very late in the evenings because things just move so fast. So if it's one thing, it's just speed, right?
Yeah, and VCs have to work on Sundays.
Of course.
Oh,
it's a tough life.
Okay, a magic wand question. If you could fix one problem in the European startup ecosystem, what would it be? With the magic wand.
It's so hard. So people always get very concrete. They talk about, I want this thing or that thing. I think the way we should think about Europe is an ecosystem. And an ecosystem, you have a framework, which is everything from immigration laws, taxation, how can you issue stock options, etc. I think that EU Inc., sort of our Delaware, could be one way of doing that. So, let's pick that one thing. That could be sort of the wand.
Okay,
thing.
so you're bullish on EU Inc. as well?
Totally.
Okay, good to know. Amazing. Well, now, for the audience, when we were making this curation, we actually asked from a few founders in our network to ask really tough questions from Staffan, so that we wouldn't be biased in any way. So now we're going to go into those questions. Okay, let's see if Staffan has an answer to this.
Are these Finnish founders or any founders?
These were actually all Finnish.
Okay, they're the toughest, by the way.
Toughest group. What mistakes do you see early stage founders make repeatedly that hasn't changed in the last 20 years?
So maybe misrepresentation of numbers.
Okay.
And what do I mean? We all know ARR. Today everything is ARR, right? The first R stands for recurring, by the way. If we didn't know.
Yeah.
No, but I think, we have invested in companies who came to us and said, we have 1 million of ARR, and you lift the lid and you realize that it's basically zero. It's actually fine, by the way, because I think most often that's not on purpose, right? You're new in the game, you want to build a company, you're super ambitious, you feel that you want to show something that looks, a little bit better. I think it's completely fine. But once in a while, I actually see sort of misrepresentation of the numbers on purpose. And that I think is not okay, because at the end of the day, it's so much about trust. You will work together for 10, 12, sometimes 15 years. And that's how we think about it. When we invest in a company, we sort of sign up to serve those entrepreneurs for a long time. And you have to trust each other.
Yeah. So don't lie to your investors, I guess.
Sometimes it's not lying. It's just sort of going slightly too far on showing how good it looks or not.
I see.
Right?
But I don't think Finnish founders make that mistake, or Nordic.
Finnish founders are the best. They talk less and they work more.
Yeah. Okay, well then, flipping it around, what are the mistakes you see early stage VCs make that hasn't changed in the past 20 years?
So we make a lot of mistakes to start with. I think the trick is to try to do maybe slightly more good things than right things, but we will obviously make a lot of mistakes. And I was on stage with Marcus Willig from Bolt just an hour ago, and I declined him twice before we eventually invested, right? One of the biggest mistakes of my life. But I think we don't put enough weight on the founders. That's the first thing that we do wrong.
What do you mean?
So sometimes we meet great founders, but we don't really like what they're doing, especially at pre-seed and seed. I think we should just skip that, because pretty much all companies, they change their business model or plan anyway. So it's much better to just back the right founders. And then I think that a portion of the venture capital ecosystem put too much effort into what I call technical moat. I think there are very few technical moats. I think it's so much more about speed, grit, building a better product, having a better UI, and so on. It's not really about having that sort of nutty professor technical edge. Those companies, I think, very seldom create lots of shareholder value down the road. I mean, Bolt, again, what's the technical moat? It's nothing, right? It's grit, culture, fantastic entrepreneur, starting in the right place, etc.
Okay, nice. Well then, you kind of mentioned this maybe between the lines, but is there like certain type of personality that you look for in a founder or CEO when when you evaluate deals?
So I don't think there are any archetypes. We have founders that are, they can jump up on a table and they can do a speech in a second, and they get all their employees super fired up. They're like charismatic, etc. And then there are some, and I'm not saying that Anton from Lovable is not charismatic. He actually is. But there was an anniversary party for them 2 nights ago, and he gets up on stage and he starts pretty much by saying, "Hi everyone, I'm Anton. Honestly, I'm just a geek." And look at the following that they have, right? So I think all kinds, but they have to be crazy ambitious. I mean, how many tech companies out of Europe IPO'd this year? We were in Klarna, they IPO'd, but it's not that many. And it's really, really hard, right? It's a crazy ambition. You have to have that brutal grit. And what we always ask ourselves is, would I want to work for this person?
You personally?
Me personally.
Would you go work for one of your founders?
They probably wouldn't hire me, but I ask myself that question every single time when we invest. Would I want to work for this 22-year-old, 28-year-old, etc.? And you'd be surprised. I'm 55, right? And quite often I would raise my hand and say, any day. They wouldn't take me. But I think it's like a great torture test question. And I think you as founders, you should ask this question for yourself. Is this someone that I want to hang out with for 10 years? And by the way, I don't know if you know, but the average VC founder relationship is longer than the average marriage. It just is. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't run your fundraising at a high speed, etc. But I don't think you marry your wife after having known her for a week or 2. So sometimes take a bit of time. Call around. That's what we always say. Call around.
Do your DD.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't talk to the people that the venture capital firm puts you in contact with. And if you do, ask them for their biggest failures. And then you call 2 or 3 people on that list rather than the opposite.
Good advice. Well, is there any red flag founder behavior that you kind of try to stay away from, or like?
Not really.
No red flag
I think
behavior?
there's so many kinds.
Okay.
I've seen almost any type of, but there is one thing maybe. It's not the founder, but we have done somewhere 160, 170 investments. We've done it for close to 25 years. And one thing that I have picked up is the feeling you get when you enter the office of a startup, the first 5-10 minutes, that correlates very strongly to success of the company. And you're sitting here thinking, what does it mean, right? Well, that's just bullshit. No, it's the feeling you get. Are they friendly? Do they come up to you? Do they look up? Do they look happy? Do they offer you coffee? It's sort of these small things that I have found correlates very strongly, and I see people nodding here. It correlates very strongly to the culture of the company.
Okay. Nice. I love that. Okay, now a tough one. How many inbound messages do you get from founders per week? And do you respond?
Yeah, I know you were going to ask this. So up until maybe a year or 2 ago, I would personally answer or have a colleague answer, but I personally answer every single email that I got. And I think it's the ambition of our whole firm. But then something happened with, let's call it AI. And you start to get so many inbound emails. And they're relatively easy to spot, right? Because it doesn't have a proper signature, and at the bottom it can say that you can opt out or stuff like that, right? And then, no. And these I've actually stopped responding to. And I think it's interesting because on one hand, raising money is really a numbers game, right? You can't just reach out to 3 because the likelihood is that they are busy or they don't like the space or something. But you also can't reach out to 200 because then you sort of end up in this bucket. So you need to find that middle ground. We often recommend that you work in waves, so you reach out to maybe 8 or 10, and the ones that don't respond in maybe 12, 24 hours, you take them off the list. They can come back, but you sort of take them off the list, and you fill up, so that you constantly have 5, 8, 10 or so that are really, really hot. And then, if you don't mind, then you create what I call an engine room. The engine room is a person or two that sits behind you as a founder who has the answers to all the stupid questions that we will ask. And then the engine room prepares drafts for you that you can just check and then send. And you will look so sharp, so fast, so smart, that the investor on the other side will say, this is something that I need to prioritize. They're really fast, etc. So create waves, have an engine room, and can be 1 or 2 relatively junior people, and make sure that you're really fast and smart.
Okay.
Sorry for not fully answering the question.
But okay. So you can't, the outreach phase, you shouldn't automate.
Not overdo it, exactly.
And overdo.
Yeah.
But later on, when you're talking, then you can.
Yeah, but it's still a person.
Yeah, there's still a person answering.
Doing it, right?
Fair enough. Okay. Well, what is the most common reason you pass on a company? Is there one specific reason?
There are 2. And the first one is when we don't think there is what we call unlimited upside. And I talk about this quite a bit with founders. And the thing is that if you take a large number of startups, they pretty much all have high risk, right? If it's not a consultancy, every startup has high risk. But there's relatively few that have unlimited upside. So if you're going to take on the risk, why not only pick the ones that have unlimited upside? So if it doesn't have unlimited upside, we will pass. Now, we misjudge that quite a bit. Because many of the biggest upsides, they were sort of in markets that didn't really exist. Okay, so that's the first thing that you can actually talk about and be quite transparent.
Yeah.
But then there's another one, which is much tougher, and it's much tougher for us, and it's actually, I think, also much tougher for the founders. And that is when you don't believe in the founders. You're not raising your hand that I want to work for you, right? That's the tough one. And the tough thing is, of course, how do you portray that, right? And it's not easy.
Yeah.
And sometimes you cannot be fully honest. I'm being very honest here, but sometimes you just can't say that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Tough love.
People are going to give me a hard time for this in a while, but...
Okay, now a fun one. One of my favorites. When is the appropriate time for a founder to do secondaries, or is it ever?
Well, it's not the seed round. It's also not the A round, I think. But I also think that at one point in time, if your company is up and running, etc., it makes sense to sell a small portion of your share or your shares, because you may want to buy a car, get a summer house, make sure the family is safe. You never know, etc. Is that 5% you're holding or 10? I don't know, but I think it's something. You also want founders to be such big believers in what they do. So it is actually okay, back to red flags. So if someone wants to do a secondary in the C or the A, it really turns me off.
Yeah.
Because why would you if you're sitting on the greatest gift to the startup world, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's the biggest red flag then maybe. Okay, flipping maybe to the VC side a little bit. I work with the VCs, all of the VCs who come to Slush. And what I've noticed in the past 2 years I've worked at Slush is VCs are FOMO, they are the most FOMO people I've ever met. They ask me, when I try to get them to Slush, they ask me, okay, who else is coming? And if I get a few good logos, okay, we're in. So VCs, they can be FOMO'd. But is there a time when you believed in a company where nobody else believed in? So you weren't FOMO'd, but you were the one who actually believed.
So there's a couple of examples. And I think my two favorite ones are Spotify, so let me come back to that. And then we have a German company called Trade Republic. Does people in here know Trade Republic? Okay, this sort of stock, let's call it an online stockbroker. They came to us in 2019. They had raised their seed capital, and we're going to raise an A round of, back then the A round was like 8 million euros, so quite small. We love the founder, a guy called Christian Hecker, and we actually love the idea because Europe is going through this transformation where people are going to own more stock than they used to do historically. It was just one issue. The seed investor had sort of 65-70% of the company. And we were not the first ones that he spoke to. Christian had spoken to many, many investors, and they all did the easy thing, which is, cool product, great founder, but what in our world is called hairy cap table. So they all passed on him. Eventually we invested. Now, at our AGM, so annual meeting last year, one of the very strong brand name American endowments, the university foundations, they asked Christian when he was on stage why he picked Creandum. And they were expecting this fancy answer. Oh, they're great, their brand, their value add, all of that stuff. And Christian just goes, yeah, it was the only term sheet I had. And sometimes, it's just believing in something. And what we did, by the way, or actually my partner Johan did, was he went to the seed investor and said, I'm going to make you more money by owning 25% of this company than owning 75%. I think that's value add, I have to say.
Amazing.
And they bought into that, of course.
Okay, sometimes you then invest even without the FOMO, I guess. Yeah.
For sure. But of course, sometimes it's a company. I mean, when we led the seed in Lovable, it's not like we were alone,
the only ones.
We had to hustle like hell, honestly, to get there. We had one of our partners. Can I tell the story?
Yeah.
So they had been around for a while. We knew the founders. They had a company called Depict. We also knew that they started and launched what was called GPT Engineer. And we could see that that was getting traction. And then suddenly it was launched publicly, sort of end November last year. It was completely on fire after just a couple of hours. So one of my colleagues realizes that, shit, this catch-up lunch, like VCs like to do, that I had planned for end December, I need to do it tomorrow. So he asked a couple of people on our team to start building on Lovable. And one of my partners joins the meeting the next day. Fred shows up with a term sheet in his back pocket, everything's filled out, etc. And we had built 2 or 3 internal tools overnight, one of which was 5,000 prompts.
Oh my God.
That was hustling, because obviously everyone wanted to invest. And then...
So sometimes you have to sell yourself as well.
We have to sell ourselves
all the time,
because what we are is basically just a UI on top of a commodity, right? Which is capital. Sorry for expanding on your question.
No worries. That's good. Good story. Okay, we don't have much time, but I want to ask this question. There's a lot of talk about VCs, like good VCs, they need to be found like ex-founders so that they can understand the founder and, stick with them. Do you think that's true?
I don't think it's true. I'm a founder of 2 venture firms, by the way, but I really don't think it's fully true. I also don't think it's true if you don't have a single founder in your partnerships. I'm a big believer in partnerships. I think you should be sort of 3, 4, 5 people getting together, and then you build around that. And that should be a diverse setup. You should have 1 or 2 founders. Maybe you should have someone who's been an investor for a long time, because it's not that easy, right? And I think some that are only founders or are founders, they get into the founder mode of, I can fix it. But you know what? You can't. It's the founders and the people that they hire who can fix things. the venture investor can help. We can ask the right questions, and it's blinking red up here. But it's very hard for us to fix things. So it needs to be sort of relatively right from the get-go.
Okay, my colleague is going to kill me, but I'm going to do a fire round. We are out of time, but I'm going to do a fire round. But you have to answer in one word to everything. So let's try. Are we in an AI bubble? Yes or no?
No.
Interesting. Size aside, what's the European city with best conditions for startups to succeed?
Tallinn.
Not Stockholm. Boom. Describe your Slush experience in one word.
Magical.
Magical. Thank you. Thank you, Staffan.
Thank you.